Book 2, welcome to Jackie's Lyric Corner. I am Jackie, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about my favorite books that I read so far, that I have read so far this year. It's almost, as I'm filming this, it's almost the end of June, and some booktubers like Greg from Supposedly Fun said that that it's like, in his opinion, he would rather wait until the end of June to talk about like favorites and do the TBR, that not TBR, but the mid-year freakout tag and all that. I'm not gonna do that. I might kind of do a check-in video, a like I don't know if I do that or not, but for right now I'm just gonna do kind of tell you my best books so far this year. Okay. So these aren't gonna, I was gonna go in order, but the way I have them stacked, I'm just gonna go with how I have them stacked. So this first one is a sequel, and I read it in April, and that is Anne of Avonlea. I love this. I am really loving this series. I'm glad I finally got into it, because I love the miniseries, and I love the Anne with an E, although I don't remember the miniseries as well because Anne with the E is new. It's still, it only came out a couple years ago, and I recently rewatched it. Well, actually, I didn't. I had rewatched it last year. I haven't rewatched it this year. But this is the second one. Picks up like sometime after the first book, how the first book ended, where Anne is now a teacher, and she and Marilla are taking care of these two twin babies. And Anne is kind of like, she's trying really hard not to be too stern with her kids and wanting her kids to love her and adore her as a teacher. And she's like she's raising she and Marilla are raising these two twin babies, and one of them, the boy, is very mischievous and gets into a lot of trouble. And it's just like just like the first book, Anne's finds herself in all these crazy fun situations. And I just love Ella Montgomery's writing and how immersive her storytelling is. Or what I've experienced so far. I only read 2 books. This one and its first one. And it's just, I love these characters, and I just love Anne and her crazy imagination, how kind and loving of a person she is, and she tries so hard to always be a kind, loving person. Like, she can't bring herself to be mean to people or to be stern. But funnily enough, she can have a temper if you, like, provoke her. So she's not always a little sweet girl. Like, sometimes, like, if you make fun of her hair or something, or are rude, in her opinion, then, she has a temper. But she's matured a lot. She's matured a bit in this one. And she's still as romantic as ever. And we do see her and Diana's relationship, and it could be inspired by, the show Anne with an E, because we definitely see how their relationship, her and Diana's relationship in the show, and how they kind of grow apart a little bit. So maybe I'm being influenced by that, but like, Anne is growing up, and she, and her path might be different from Diana's, but I still love their friendship. Anne is just such a loyal person, and I like all the scenes when she's being a teacher. And I actually was watching one of those reading 1-star reviews of your favorite books videos, and it was Kaylee from Luminous Libro, and one of her favorites is this book, and she read some 1-star reviews, and one of the 1-star reviews mentions how one of the kids in her class is such, like, he's like almost too good, and I sort of can see and agree with that to an extent, where that character is just incredibly, like, so sweet and stuff, to the point of, like, syrupy sweet. Like, he's almost angelic. And at the time when I was reading, I was like, yeah, I mean, not every kid is like that. And then also the little boy that she's watching, the little twin boy, there was that kid drove me nuts. but Anne still just loves kids, and I think she would be a great mom one day. I don't know what's gonna happen. I think we are gonna get to that point in the series, because I've heard like little teases here and there for the next several books. But I'm enjoying the series, and I will get to book 3 soon. But I have to be like in the right mood for these kinds of books, because I'm not the target audience. It is for younger readers. And there are times when I'm just not into wholesome stories. I'm not always in the mood for them. But I really enjoyed this. This made me feel good and happy. And sometimes you need something light and fluffy and fun. And if you're like me and you prefer watching romance rather than reading a romance novel, then this is a good option to go. Like, for if you need some fluff, but you're not into reading a romance. These are really good, because they still are like such sweet stories. And I just had such a good, it made me smile, and it was very funny, and like it's so her story and the story is so charming, and I'm just happy I finally got into it. I wish I had gotten into this series when I was a little bit younger, because I think I would have really loved it back then. But yeah, I love this book. And next we have something that's a reread, actually, but it was so long ago that I barely remember what happens in the book. And the only reason I remember anything is because of adaptations of this book. And it's Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice. And I remember I always loved Anne Rice's writing style and all her details that she puts in her books and her backstory for all her characters. And I liked, when I was reading The Witching Hour, the Mayfair trilogy, when I started that the first book, I remember enjoying that when I first read it, and I started reading it again recently. And I think I'm going to try to save it for, I don't know if I might save it for October, September time. I mean, although, like, I don't know what's gonna happen on our trip to London. I mean, I told my dad today about that. He had asked me, because he was like talking about how he wasn't sure about us doing that, he and my mom, and he could tell that I was not happy about us not going. And he was like, and he asked me, and I said I'd rather go there. So hopefully we're still gonna do that. And that's gonna be, my dad last night, he said September. So anyway. So I don't know when I'll get back to the Witching Hour, but anyway, I just love this. It's very dark and erotic in a way. You have this vampire who's telling his life story in modern being the 1990s in this story, because this is when she wrote that in the 90s. And he's telling his life story about the vampire who made him Lestat, and his relationship with this girl vampire he and Lestat created, Claudia, and their relationship. And it's so dark, and such a dark, sensual story. And don't worry, the vampires don't sparkle, because I know people, God forbid, you try to be creative with them. And these are definitely not soft vegetarian vampires either. But at the same time, I was about to say Lestat, Louis, our narrator, he's very philosophical and asks a lot of questions about his purpose, about his existence in the world. And he hates, he kind of hates himself, and, hates being kind of resents that Lestat made him to a vampire. And they have a very complicated, very complex relationship, and just as their relationship with Claudia. And it's just so, he has such passion, and the writing, like I said, I love Anne Rice's writing. Like I said, I can't think of another word, but so immersive and beautiful and poetic. And, you really get inside the head of the characters, and you really get to know them. They're, she's almost like Stephen King, but a little less crass. Like, Stephen King is, he gets to the nitty gritty. She's a little more, like I said, more philosophical, and there's a romanticism to her, and that could, and of course, that could have something to do with her being a female writer, and then Stephen King's a male writer. So that probably is a contributing factor for how these two authors write. But there are some similar vibes to them, I think, in how much they put in the story and how they look at the darker side of humanity. I do have her two more religion-leaning books. They're not about religion, but they're about, Jesus and everything. And I have them because we originally bought them for my grandma, but she's probably never going to read them. They, in fact, were in a cabinet in her dining room, so she's had them for years. So my mom was like, you know what, she's not going to miss them, just take them. And I didn't, so I might read them. I was never sure if I would or not, but I don't mind Christian fiction. I like Christian fiction. I'm okay with that, but I'm also a Christian, so. But yeah, this is just so good. And I think for vampire fans, if you don't like Twilight but you still like the romances, but if you like Buffy, and no, I'm not saying that it's not like Buffy at all, but I think there's actually probably a better thing is Dracula. It's probably more Dracula. If you love Dracula, then read this. So anyway, okay, next. Okay, so the next two books are part of my journey through Filipino literature. So the first is this one I just read this month, and that is via Herrow, and it translates to Traveler, I believe. And I read another book by the author. Still don't know how to say his name. I never got a chance to ask my grandmother. But anyway, this is about, this young man. His parents were killed during World War II. He was a little boy, so he barely remembers them. And he ends up being found by this black American soldier who decides to take him home. He is a professor. So he very much so, our main character, the boy whom he calls Buddy, gets a very high education and gets to go to school and college and everything. And he lives a pretty good life. And he has a very strong relationship with his sister who gets into trouble in her relationships. And he just, as he gets older, he decides to learn more about his birth country and the Filipino territories, and understand where he comes from, and wants to learn more about the culture. But he constantly feels like he's displaced, like he's still an outsider because he was raised in America, in the U.S., in San Francisco, and his dad was a professor. So he had a pretty good, wealthy life, a pretty decent life. So he can't understand necessarily what it is like for Filipinos. And he travels from Japan to the Middle East and just pieces it all together, the history of the Philippine territories. And it's a very bittersweet story, because just learning about your past, but also still feeling like an outsider. And I also love his relationship with his sister. It's so endearing and so sweet, and they have such a strong bond. And in a way, they both come to the similar conclusions and learn similar things about life and who they are and what they want, and they almost seem to go in a similar direction, on a similar path. Now, there is a love story in this, but I feel like the love story between, the romantic love story isn't as strong as his story with his sister. I was cool with them having a love story, but I feel like it wasn't as developed as his relationship with his sister. I really appreciated, that one was a more powerful love story, I think, than his romantic love story. I do wish there had been more to this, but maybe that was enough about how much they had in this book. But yeah, this was, really good, and I am just so happy to have read it. I really enjoyed learning about, and I almost feel like I kind of, in a small way, connect to our main character, Buddy, because I'm also trying to get in touch with my Filipino heritage. Now, unfortunately, I can't go there. I haven't been given the opportunity to go. And I don't know if I could or not. But anyway, so, and I'm also only 25%, while he is full-on Filipino, just happened to have been raised in San Francisco. So that there's a lot of differences between me and the main character of this book, but I definitely can connect with his wanting to learn more about his heritage. So I enjoyed this. Like I said, I wish it was longer, but it was a really great story. So and then the other one, which I did a review of this one, a dual review of this one this one in another book I read, When Elephants Dance. This one is about Caridad. She is our main character, and she is living in Australia with her husband and their teenage daughter, although her and her husband are having problems. And she hasn't had the best relationship with her mom. And her mom's never written to her. She always receives letters from her cousins updating her on what's going on with their family. And one day her mom actually sends her a letter. Writes a letter herself and tells her she needs to come home because she has something she needs to tell her. And she learns some history about her past. And that maybe things are a little more complicated than she thought with her and her mom. And it's also something that her aunt and her cousin, not the one who writes to her, but another cousin of hers, they know a little bit more about her past than she realizes. So it's mother and daughter relationships and what a mother will do to protect her child and protect her life. And it's like with When Elephants Dance, it is a World War II story. I feel like with Filipino literature, you're going to get a lot of World War II stories. It's just, I love reading about relationships between mothers and daughters. Because, you get a lot of stories about fathers and sons. But I want to get more stories about mothers and daughters. Because, as a girl with a relationship with her own mom. And it was so sweet. And it's bitter. It's also a very bittersweet story. And this one was a little bit easier, though. Because unlike When Elephants Dance, we know that the characters survived during World War II. It's more about the aftermath. And how they're trying to survive now. And deal with the past. So it's definitely one that looks at the past and looks at how the past can shape the present, how it reflects it, and it's so good. It's such a sweet story. And it's blurred by Amy Tan, the author of Joy Luck Club. That. Okay, so the next book is another spring read, and that was Rebecca's Tale. So if you've read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, this is a sequel to that story. Obviously not written by Daphne du Maurier, it's written by Sally Bowman, but I think Sally Bowman did a really good job of capturing the story and the characters. I would be curious to read Goodreads reviews and hear other people's reviews if there are any on YouTube talking about this, because I liked it. I enjoyed it. I had such a wonderful time. It felt very cozy and comforting read. It was very dark and not a happy story all the time. And I also love that we literally got Rebecca's tale. Like, we didn't just, we did get Rebecca's point of view in the story. So we had this character, I'm forgetting the character's name. I'm trying to think of. Oh, he's Scottish. That's right. This young Scottish scholar comes from Scotland to visit England, and he talks to Colonel Julian, who, if you may remember if you have read Rebecca, you might remember him. He had a minor role in the original novel. He has a bigger role in this story. We get both those two people's perspectives. And then we also get his daughter's perspective. So we get a lot of people's point of view. A lot of people that are still, a lot of people from the original novel that are still here. Like, also the cousin, Rebecca's cousin, I don't remember his name. And we learn their story in the aftermath of them and how they're surviving now, what things are like. And Terrence Gray is trying to piece it all together and figure out what really happened. And learning about who Rebecca was, and if any of the people in her life that she's crossed paths with, do they truly know her? Do they truly understand her? Because everybody has a very different perspective on Rebecca, and a lot of the male characters are very much in love with her. and a lot of the female characters admire her and respect her and just want to be her. So no one really knows her, who she truly is. And we, like I said, we get her point of view, which is great. And I love that. I love how we finally, she has a voice. We learn who she is and how she felt. And we learn a lot about her past, or the past that Sally Bowman has come up with. I don't know if her information was gotten from like notes by Daphne du Maurier. I would assume so, but maybe not. Maybe she's just getting the little bit of information that's given in the book about Rebecca. And it's such a touching story, very heartbreaking. It really makes you realize that Rebecca isn't just a mean bitch. We do get to see there is a reason she can be cold and cruel. And she's a very complicated woman. So this was such a great story, such a brilliant story. And I love now there are so many authors that are basically taking characters, particularly female characters that are introduced and in a novel, and they were secondary characters, but giving them an actual voice, like making them the main character. Like there's now that like for instance, The Great Gatsby, now that one is, free now. It's no longer under copyright law. So a lot of people, like there is a book about Jordan Baker and her origins, and there's of course the infamous Why Sargasso Sea, which is about Bertha Antoinetta Mason, the mad woman in the attic, Rochester's first wife, which I do want to read that one at some point. But I'm definitely, if you enjoyed Rebecca, please check this out. I think it's really good. I mean, granted, I might be wrong, because I'm a little more easier to please than other people, but I just love this book. But like I said, read Rebecca first. Obviously, don't read this one next until after you've read Rebecca. Okay, next is another book that has to do with my Filipino journey with Filipino literature, and this is the same author who wrote Via Haro. This is a book in his saga series, his Rosales series, and this is the first book. We have our main character, this young man who he is trying to find his name, if we have the name. I cannot remember the name. What is it? It's one Sitak, I think it is. Let me see. I'm trying to. Istak. He is a young priest, and his mentor has just died at the beginning of the book. So this new priest comes, and he doesn't like Istak. So he basically fires him, and Istak has to go home and become a farmer. But he feels like now he's become part of the clergy. He can't fit in. He can't adapt to that, but he tries. But then the head of the clergy decides to kick out their whole village because he doesn't like them. And he ends up crossing paths with this woman whose older husband just died. And the family takes this woman in, and she goes with them when they decide that they need to find a new home. And there's a bit of a love story. But there kind of is a love triangle, but it's kind of a weak love triangle. It's because it's like at the, it ends up not a lot happening with it. I mean, the brothers do kind of fight over this woman, but then nothing comes of it, which was disappointing. Because, I'm one of those people who doesn't, depending on the characters in the story, I don't mind love triangles. And I think if you're going to do one, you really need to commit to it. And this book did not. But despite that, this was such a great story. I mean, it does deal with religion and having faith. And Istak does start to question faith in this book and question what he believes in, especially with what happens to how they get kicked off their land. And it's very much a journey story, like a traveling story where these characters, they have to find a new home, and there's a lot of dangers along the way. But it was a great starting story. I do think the romance was very sweet and endearing. I wish there could have been more. Like, I feel like the characters weren't some of these characters weren't complex enough, but they were complex at the same time, if that makes any sense. And I really enjoyed this first book. It was really good, and I think part of my love for this book right now could potentially be it's the first book in this big saga, and I haven't read a lot of Filipino, and this is my first time reading Filipino literature, so that's probably at the moment why it's so I'm so into it right now. But so I don't know if it will be my favorite book, but it's my favorite as of this year, and it was really good. And then I finally read and finished A Gentleman in Moscow by Amar Tolls. The author of Rules of Civility, which is Olive from Book Olive's favorite book. This is about this count who ends up having to, because he committed what is considered illegal, what is considered a crime, he is put under lock and key in this hotel, and it's about his day-to-day life, being stuck in this hotel, and his interactions with all the people that live at the hotel and everything, and his relationship with these two little girls that come into his life, and the bond he formed with those two little girls. And it's just, the writing is so beautiful. Like, Amar Tolls has such beautiful writing, and the story was really immersive, and it made me want to hang out in a hotel while I was reading. I want to stay in a hotel and explore a hotel like he is. There's a lot of political stuff. This is during a really strong political era in Russian history. And I love the Count. He's such a fun, awesome character. And I always like more intellectual type characters over the badass type characters. I mean, I don't mind badass type characters. I enjoy some of them, but I kind of lean towards more the clever intellectual types. Those types of characters. Like that, like Loki versus Thor. I prefer Loki, although I do love Thor. I do have a soft spot for Thor. But yeah, this was so good. And I wish I could watch the adaptation, but I don't think I have access to it, because I know it's on a streaming network that I don't think I have. I mean, I'm pretty sure I don't have access to that. And I'm not paying for streaming network. I mean, I'm paying for one streaming, well, two technically. Or was supposed to be paying for Disney Plus. But it's my sister's account, and they told me not to worry about it. But I'm paying for another one, so it's like, my mom's paying for everything else. So I'm not gonna ask to get, whatever streaming network this is on, because I think it's on Paramount. But, I mean, and that's, the only one on there that I might be interested in, so, anyway. But, yeah, this was so great, and it's hard to, this list is so hard to do, because it's hard to really talk about these books and have a lot of variety in my conversations. The closest to variety I get is maybe describing what each book is about, but it's just, I feel the same about all of these books. They're all immersive. Almost all of them, I love their writing. And I love the worlds that they create, the atmospheres, and they make great, amazing characters. So I feel like I'm basically repeating myself, because I don't know what else to say about these books. But I just love them. And I really love this one. And I don't know if I'm going to read The Lincoln Highway or not, but I keep looking at it, so maybe I will one day. But anyway, I love this. I had such a great time with this book. It was so much fun. And so cozy with the hotel atmosphere. Like I said, I always wanted to live at this hotel and experience it. Okay, next is another book that's has to do with my journey with Filipino literature. And this was the first book I read and finished this year. And that is Touch Me Not by Jose Rosell, who was a national hero in the Philippines. And this was really good. This was, this is considered a classic in Filipino literature. And it's a story that, takes place around the same time as Dusk takes place, which is during the time when Spain took over. And it really looks at the consequences of that and what happened to the people and what they had to deal with, the natives of the Philippine Islands, and just how the Spanish believed themselves to be doing them a favor. They're taking over and running their territories and thinking that we're all educated and you guys aren't, so we're helping you out, educating you. So there's a lot of sadness because these characters are just like struggling, and just so there's a lot of discussion about colonialism. And I love, there's one character that's a mom, and one of her sons gets into some trouble, legal trouble, and she's trying to stay strong, and she desperately wants her sons back, whom she loves more than anything. There is a bit of a sweet little romance in the story, with our main character coming back and trying to, he wants to marry his beloved, who decided to become a nun so she could stay pure for him, and she doesn't, and she, and it's a very sad love story because it's, he asks a lot of her, and she has to sacrifice a lot for him. I mean, she's willing to do it because she loves him. And my feelings are slowly growing more and more complicated about the romance. I mean, I definitely want to reread it at some point, but it was great to read a classic from the Philippines, and just really, and I would love to know what other people, I would love to hear other people talk about this book and then hear their thoughts on the book and the romance, and I wonder how they feel about the love story between our main character and the woman. Like, it's just, but I definitely prefer the relationship between them with the mother and her two sons. I mean, I wish we had got more of that story. But yeah, this was so great, and I just love the story. I want to reread it, and it's just so good. And now that I know more about the history, I definitely want to reread it, so I can really connect with it more. So there's that. Now the last one is one I just finished. So technically, I've only read a part of the book all the way to the end this year, because I had started a while back, and it was one of these things where it's one of the many books that I had started and then put down for a while and then came back to and then put down again. So I wanted to finally finish it, so I decided to finish it this month. And that is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This was so much fun. I mean, I love reading a book that's historical, so in a different time period, but with fantasy elements. I love that. I love reading more. I mean, there's certain time periods that are written about in historical fiction that you're definitely going to you might potentially get fantasy stuff, like the medieval period. But I love this story, a time period that you wouldn't get a lot. You don't have fantasy elements. Like, I love that, so in this story, we have this is a world, an alternate history, where magic once did exist, but nowadays, they just have people that are, that practice that study magic, and are fascinated by it. And there are some people who decided, we want magic, we want to see if we can bring magic back. Or if there are still magicians in the world. And this one particular magician, Mr. Norrell, an older man, steps up and demonstrates for the people, and this is made into this big, huge deal because everyone just loves it. Everyone's all excited, and they're like, oh my god, we found a real magician. And he starts kind of taking over and being like, oh, I'm the only one that can practice magic, no one else. And he even takes all the books and won't even take on a student. He doesn't want anyone to practice magic. But all of a sudden, this younger guy, Jonathan Strange, shows up, and he turns out to be a very powerful, very skilled magician too. And Norrell is convinced to take him under his wing, under his tutelage, but they have very opposing ideas on how to do magic. Like, our Jonathan Strange is younger, so he has a non-traditional view of magic, and they kind of become rivals. And Jonathan Strange even attempts to write a book, and but meanwhile, there's the subplot of this fairy that is described as Thistledown Man, and he shows up and kidnaps a noble lady as well as this butler, and insisting he's going to make this butler, Stephen Black, who is a black man, he's going to make him king. And he holds all these women as his prisoners. This woman and another woman he later kidnaps and keeps them as his captives and makes them dance all night and basically enchants him and Stephen Black. And like, he is definitely he is not like Sarah J. Maas's Faye. He is creepy and scary and controlling and acts like a spoiled human child oftentimes and treats humans like his toys that he can play with. And doesn't listen to, when someone questions him, he's like, nope, I'm not listening to you because you're a weak, stupid mortal. And it's just, and what I really enjoy about this particular writing is that Susanna Clarke writes the story like it's a novel from the Regency period, which this is when it's set, Regency Victorian. And it feels like a Dickens novel. And it was just so much fun to read. It's just really long. Like, see, this thing is chunky. This is over 1,006 pages. And I have trouble committing to that. Even though I do enjoy reading them, it still takes me a long time to commit. But this was just, I love this world and these two characters. I loved them and I hated them. The two guys, the two magicians. But I would get so frustrated with Norrell and Jonathan Strange, but I also kind of liked them and I was charmed by them. And I enjoyed their story and their adventure. And like I said, if you prefer the more closer to Celtic mythology fairies and not the Sarah J. Maas fairies, then you'll probably enjoy this. Like, a Thistledown Man our Thistledown gentleman is creepy, and like I said, and is so creepy and has a lot of power, and just his attitude, like, imagine Holly Black's fairy, like the Cruel Princess, probably he would fit in that world. Thistledown Man, I think he would fit in their world quite a bit, and it's so good. And I wanted to study magic while I was reading this. I wish you could study it. And then there's also, like, there are footnotes throughout the book kind of explaining things that are mentioned in the book, and it's such a fun, exciting story. Like I said, the only problem is it's so long, so I had a hard time committing, reading this for long periods of time. I would get very frustrated and then put it back on the shelf and come back to it later. But I really, I just loved this book. I had such a fun time with this. And I will read it again at some point. So, those are all my favorite books for this year. Would love to know what your favorite books that you've read so far this year are. Like I said, I might do a check-in for my goals, at some point before the end of the month, or I might wait until July to film it. I don't know. I will see. But it's like, I was looking at the questions for the mid-year freakout tag, and it was very hard to come up with answers, even though, one, or at least, like, I or at least, like, one answer or come up with, even though I do have my favorites, it just was very, I just don't know how I feel about the mid-year freakout tag. Like I said, I want to do the goals check-in tag. Possibly, I don't know. But anyway. So so if you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you haven't and you are interested in watching more of my videos. And click the bell icon if you want to be notified when I upload my videos. I hope you are enjoying your reading so far. Like I said, if you want to share your best books so far in the first half of the year, please feel free to share in the comments. Or, and I will talk to y'all later. All right, bye.